Africa is sitting on the future of the global economy. Lithium, cobalt, graphite, copper, rare earths, these are the lifeblood of electric vehicles, clean energy and semiconductors. And now, India has entered the race. In January 2025, New Delhi launched a $4 billion critical minerals mission with a clear goal. By 2031, secure 50 overseas mines, more than 30 of them in Africa. The mission includes not just mining, but also processing and recycling plants. This raises a profound question. Is this India's version of the same old resource scramble, another chapter in neo-colonial exploitation, or could it be different? At the center of India's overseas minerals push is KABIL, Khanij Bidesh. India Limited, KABIL is a joint venture of three state-owned giants, Nalco, Hindustan Copper Limited, HCL, and Mineral Exploration Corporation Limited, MECL. Its mandate is simple: scout, acquire and offtake overseas critical mineral assets. KABIL also partners with other Indian state-owned enterprises and private miners, giving India a coordinated platform to buy stakes in African mines, run exploration campaigns, and lock in supply agreements. This is not ad hoc. It is deliberate state-backed industrial diplomacy, designed to underpin India's energy transition and semiconductor ambitions. Country by country, where in Africa is the action? Zambia, copper and cobalt. India and Zambia have launched a 3-year government-to-government exploration program. Indian geologists are already on the ground, surveying 9,000 square kilometers for copper and cobalt, with lab analysis running back in India. If viable deposits are confirmed, the pathway is clear: exploration, delineated resources, mining leases, potential joint ventures. Zambia has also signaled its intent to push for state equity stakes of up to 30% in future projects, ensuring it retains long-term upside. DRC, cobalt and copper. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the world's cobalt heartland, discussions are underway on an initial supply agreement. A draft MOU is being prepared to guarantee India a flow of cobalt and copper. But this sits against a volatile backdrop. The DRC has recently floated export bans and quotas to stabilize its market. Any India-DRC deal must therefore balance guaranteed supply with local beneficiation requirements. Namibia, uranium and critical minerals. In July 2025, India and Namibia elevated their partnership to include energy and critical minerals cooperation. Reports suggest uranium supply is part of the discussion, alongside rare earths and other transition metals. Mozambique, natural graphite. Mozambique's Balama mine is one of the world's biggest non-China graphite sources, critical for battery anodes. But the country is not without risk. In late 2024, unrest forced a temporary shutdown and force majeure on shipments. Operations resumed in July 2025, but community consent, local benefits, and transport security remain fragile. India's interest is clear. It needs graphite diversification away from China, and Mozambique is a rare option. Zimbabwe, lithium. Zimbabwe is now Africa's lithium giant. Harare has announced a ban on lithium concentrate exports from 2027 to force investors to build refining and processing capacity inside the country. For India, this is both a challenge and an opportunity. Any offtake or joint venture must fit into Zimbabwe's downstream policy. This could either push India into building local processing plants or make it reconsider. Wider MAU network. Beyond these country-specific deals, India's Ministry of Mines lists bilateral cooperation agreements with South Africa, Mozambique, DRC, Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, Côte d'Ivoire, and Zimbabwe. These MOUs range from exploration data sharing to joint working groups to frameworks for supply agreements and processing facilities. What minerals India is targeting in Africa? India's shopping list in Africa is strategic. Cobalt and copper from Zambia and the DRC, essential for battery cathodes and electrification. Natural graphite from Mozambique, Tanzania, Madagascar, vital for anodes. Lithium from Zimbabwe and potentially Namibia for EV batteries. Nickel, manganese, rare earths across the SADC region, future targets under current MOUs. This mix maps directly onto India's industrial plan: secure EV supply chains, reduce dependence on China, and support its semiconductor manufacturing mission. Instruments India is using. India is not improvising. It is deploying a set of consistent instruments: government-to-government MOUs and joint working groups on mining rights, geology, and processing. SOE-led acquisitions and joint ventures through KABIL and other state-owned enterprises. exploration campaigns that can flip into mining leases if results are positive. Industrial diplomacy, with the $4 billion critical minerals mission acting as a financial backstop for overseas acquisitions. This combination gives India leverage and credibility. Governments see a serious partner with a clear budget and timeline, not just speculative investors. Near-term watch list. Signs of momentum. The key milestones to watch in the coming months include finalization of the India-DRC Cobalt-Copper Pact, moving from MOU draft to binding supply terms. Conversion of India's Zambia exploration program into delineated resources and eventual joint ventures. New KABIL tie-ups, such as its partnership with NLC India to scale overseas projects. Early announcements of processing or recycling facilities tied to Indian agreements in Africa. These will show whether India's ambitions are materializing or still only on paper. How does this compare? Now let's place India within the global context. The West. For over a century, Western companies dug Africa's gold, oil, and copper. The model was extract and export, leaving behind environmental scars and shallow development. The language of aid never translated into real industrialization. China. From the 2000s onwards, China brought infrastructure for resources deals, railways, highways, ports, and in return, long-term access to oil and minerals. Africa got visible assets, but also mounting debts, opaque contracts, and uneven benefits. India. Entering later, smaller in financial muscle than China, but armed with historical diaspora ties and the rhetoric of South-South cooperation. The big question, will India simply repeat the extractive playbook, or can it craft a different model, one that is less neo-colonial and more genuinely collaborative? Neocolonialism or genuine partnership? On one level, India's strategy looks worryingly familiar. Africa's minerals mapped, agreements signed, mines secured, while Africa itself lacks a coordinated continental plan. This is the neo-colonial risk of the green economy. Africa becomes the supplier of rocks for someone else's clean energy transition. But there is another side. India emphasizes partnership, positions itself as an alternative to China and the West, and speaks the language of mutual growth. If, and only if, these words are backed with local processing plants, technology transfer, and industrial investment, then this could be a new kind of South-South model. What Africa must do, the playbook for a win-win. If Africa is to avoid repeating history, it must act decisively. Here is the playbook. 1. AU Critical Minerals Compact. Coordinate across states so no country undercuts another. Specialize. Cobalt sulfate in one sub-region, graphite anodes in another, manganese sulfate elsewhere. Harmonize ESG standards, tax rules, and export ban triggers. 2. Scale African exploration first. Fund geological surveys run by African universities and agencies. Build continental data rooms so Africans know what we own before signing deals. 3. Negotiate for value, not volume. Make every offtake conditional on local processing within 24-36 months. Training pipelines and scholarships in metallurgy and geology. Grid and water co-investments. Community development agreements with measurable outcomes. 4. Use equity templates that protect upside. Zambia's move to demand 30% state stakes is a useful precedent. Ensure anti-dilution clauses so governments aren't squeezed out. 5. Pre-build finance pool sovereign resources with the African Development Bank. Create risk-insured funds to co-finance refineries and processing plants. 6. Publish a 2031 scoreboard, track quarterly progress. Hectares explored, tons refined, megawatts added, jobs created. What gets measured gets built. Ghana's gold lesson: why vision and leadership matter. If you want proof that leadership changes everything, look at Ghana's Gold Bod program. In its first month, Gold Bod earned $1.17 billion in foreign exchange. In April 2025 alone, gold exports brought in nearly $900 million. In just 4 months, artisanal gold exports generated $4 billion. By May, Ghana had exported 56 tons of gold worth $5 billion. That's $1.2 billion per month from gold exports, without a single EV factory. Now imagine if Africa applied the same discipline to critical minerals. If Ghana can mobilize $5 billion in 5 months from gold, imagine the scale if lithium or cobalt were processed into battery-grade lithium carbonate or cobalt sulfate. Imagine exporting graphite anodes, cathode materials, and even assembled battery packs. India has a $4 billion plan, a 7-year timeline, and the political will. Africa has the resources. The missing ingredient is vision and coordination. Neutral but critical perspective. From a neutral standpoint, India's arrival is neither automatically exploitative nor inherently transformative. It depends entirely on Africa's response. If Africa bargains weakly, India's mission will look like a green-era replay of colonial extraction. But if Africa negotiates smartly, insists on value addition, and coordinates regionally, then India's $4 billion could catalyze a win-win South-South development story, one where Africa finally moves up the value chain. Closing, call to reflection. So the question is not whether India is coming. It already has a strategy, a budget, and a timeline. The question is, will Africa match that clarity with its own? By 2031, Africa could still be exporting raw rocks while others build industries. Or, with vision, coordination, and leadership, this could be the decade when Africa finally turns critical minerals into real transformation. The choice remains open. If you found this valuable, hit subscribe and stay tuned.